In the winter of 1979, something happened that no government on Earth had predicted, no intelligence agency had anticipated, and no political scientist had modeled in their calculations. A revolution. Not the kind driven by tanks and military coups, not the kind organized by a foreign power or a political party with a manifesto and a 5-year plan, but a revolution of the streets, of millions of ordinary people, doctors, merchants, students, factory workers, clerics, who walked out of their homes and into history with nothing but their voices and an absolute certainty that the world they were living in had to end. In the span of a single year, one of America's closest allies in the Middle East, a king who sat on the Peacock throne, who commanded the 5th largest military on Earth, who had been placed in power with the direct assistance of the CIA, simply ceased to exist as a political force. Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi fled Iran on January 16, 1979, carrying a small container of Iranian soil. He would never return. 14 days later, a 76-year-old cleric who had spent 15 years in exile, first in Iraq, then in a small house outside Paris, stepped off an Air France Boeing 747 at Mehrabad Airport in Tehran. The crowd that met him numbered in the millions. What happened next would reshape the Middle East, redefine the relationship between Islam and political power, and send shockwaves through the world that are still being felt today. This is the story of how it happened and why the world never saw it coming.
To understand the revolution, you have to understand the man it was designed to remove. Mohammad Reza Shah came to power not through conquest or inheritance alone, but through a foreign intervention that Iran has never forgotten. In 1951, a democratically elected Iranian prime minister named Mohammad Mossadegh made a decision that seemed entirely reasonable to him and catastrophically dangerous to London and Washington. He nationalized Iran's oil. For decades, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, a British firm, had extracted Iran's greatest natural resource while returning a fraction of its value to the Iranian people. The numbers were stark and humiliating. Britain collected more in taxes from the company than Iran received in royalties from its own ground. Mossadegh changed that. The Iranian parliament voted unanimously to take back control of Iranian oil. Crowds filled the streets of Tehran in celebration. For the first time in living memory, Iran would control its own wealth. The British response was swift. A naval blockade strangled Iranian oil exports. Technicians withdrew. The economy suffocated. Then, in August 1953, the CIA and British intelligence services executed Operation Ajax. Paid mobs stormed through Tehran. Military officers loyal to the Shah moved against Mossadegh's government. Within 72 hours, it was over. Mossadegh was arrested, tried, and spent the rest of his life under house arrest. The Shah returned from brief exile, now permanently indebted to foreign powers. That debt and the memory of what had been done would smolder inside Iran for the next 26 years, waiting for the moment it would finally ignite. The Shah, who returned from exile in 1953, was a different man from the one who had left. Shaken by how quickly his throne had nearly collapsed, Mohammad Reza Shah drew a lesson that would define and ultimately destroy his reign. He could trust no one. In 1957, with American and Israeli assistance, he established SAVAK, the Iranian secret police, an organization that would become, in the decades that followed, one of the most feared intelligence services in the world. SAVAK did not merely monitor dissent, it hunted it. Thousands of Iranians were imprisoned, tortured, and in some cases disappeared entirely. Political parties were abolished, the press was controlled. Intellectuals who questioned the regime found themselves in Evin prison, where the methods of interrogation left marks that lasted lifetimes. Yet alongside this darkness, something genuinely extraordinary was happening. The Shah's White Revolution, launched in 1963, redistributed land, expanded education, granted women the right to vote, and channeled rivers of oil revenue into infrastructure that was transforming Iran at visible speed. A country that had been largely agrarian a generation earlier was growing universities, highways, and factories at a pace that astonished visiting economists. By the 1970s, Tehran was a city of contrasts so extreme they seemed almost theatrical. Skyscrapers and ancient bazaars, women in miniskirts beside women in chadors, discotheques operating within walking distance of mosques. Iran was modernizing, but it was modernizing on the Shah's terms, at the Shah's pace, with the Shah's secret police ensuring that no one questioned the direction. The pressure was building, and in a country with Iran's history, pressure always finds a way out.
The voice that would channel that pressure had been sharpening itself for decades. Ruhollah Khomeini was born in 1902 in a small town in central Iran. By the time he emerged as a significant political figure in the early 1960s, he had spent 40 years studying Islamic jurisprudence in the seminary city of Qom, reading, teaching, and developing a theological framework that would eventually upend the political order of an entire region. His first major confrontation with the Shah came in 1963, when he publicly denounced the White Revolution, not because he opposed land reform or women's rights in principle, but because he saw the entire project as a surrender of Iranian sovereignty to American influence. The Shah had him arrested. Protests erupted. Dozens were killed. Then the Shah made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Rather than executing Khomeini, which would have made him a martyr, he exiled him, first to Turkey, then to the Shia holy city of Najaf in Iraq, where Khomeini spent 13 years developing his most radical idea, Velayat-e-Faqih, the guardianship of the Islamic jurist. The concept was revolutionary in the most literal sense. Khomeini argued that in the absence of the hidden imam, supreme political authority should rest not with a king or an elected government, but with the most qualified Islamic scholar. In other words, a cleric should rule. It was an idea that had no real precedent in Islamic political history. Most Islamic scholars considered it theologically controversial, but Khomeini delivered his lectures on cassette tapes that were duplicated by the thousands and smuggled into Iran inside hollowed-out fruit. By the time the Shah understood what was happening, it was already too late.
The revolution did not begin with guns. It began with paper. In January 1978, an Iranian government newspaper published an article attacking Khomeini, describing him as a foreign agent, questioning his religious credentials, implying he lived a dissolute life in exile. It was a miscalculation of historic proportions. Within 24 hours, seminary students in Qom took to the streets in protest. Security forces opened fire. Several protesters were killed. In Shia tradition, the dead are mourned on the 40th day after their death. 40 days after Qom, protests erupted in Tabriz. Security forces opened fire again. More deaths, more 40-day cycles of mourning that became cycles of protest. The Shah's government had accidentally created a revolutionary calendar. Through the spring and summer of 1978, the cycle accelerated. Each crackdown produced more martyrs. Each set of martyrs produced larger protests. The Shah responded with a combination of concession and repression that satisfied no one and emboldened everyone. In September 1978, in Tehran's Jaleh Square, security forces opened fire on a crowd of protesters. The exact death toll remains disputed. Official figures said dozens, opposition figures claimed hundreds. The event became known as Black Friday, and it ended any remaining possibility of compromise. The middle ground, always fragile in revolutionary moments, had disappeared entirely. What remained was a simple binary choice that the Shah seemed constitutionally unable to make: crush the revolution with overwhelming force, which his generals believed he could still do, or negotiate a genuine transfer of power. He chose neither, and in choosing neither, he chose both outcomes simultaneously.
By the autumn of 1978, the revolution had found its most powerful weapon. Not weapons, not an army, not a political party, a strike. Iranian oil workers, the men who operated the infrastructure that produced the revenue that funded everything the Shah had built, walked off the job. Oil production collapsed from 6 million barrels a day to virtually nothing. The financial architecture of the Pahlavi state began to disintegrate in real time. Then the Bazaris joined, the merchants who operated Iran's vast traditional marketplace networks shuttered their shops. The bazaar, that ancient network of commerce that had survived every invasion, every dynasty, every upheaval in Iranian history, went silent. Then the civil servants, the teachers, the bank employees. Iran's modern economy, built over decades of oil revenue and foreign investment, was being dismantled not by bombs, but by the collective decision of millions of ordinary people to simply stop. The Shah, by now visibly ill with the lymphoma that would kill him within 2 years, seemed paralyzed. American intelligence agencies sent contradictory signals. The Carter administration, publicly committed to human rights, privately desperate to preserve the stability of a crucial Cold War ally, offered advice that amounted to, "We support you, but please don't massacre your people." It was not guidance suited to the moment. In November 1978, the Shah appointed a military government. It made no difference. In December, during the holy month of Muharram, millions of Iranians took to the streets simultaneously in cities across the country, the largest single protest in human history to that point. The Shah's generals looked at those numbers and told him the truth. The army could not shoot its way out of this. On January 16, 1979, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi walked across the tarmac at Mehrabad Airport in Tehran and boarded a plane. He was officially going on vacation. Everyone understood
he was never coming back. The scenes at the airport were extraordinary. Some military officers wept openly. Others, perhaps sensing which way history was moving, struggled to conceal their relief. Ordinary Iranians watching the broadcast on state television reacted with disbelief, then with an eruption of joy that spread through the streets of Tehran like electricity. Car horns, fireworks, strangers embracing, the Shah's image torn from public buildings and replaced with the face of the man who was still in Paris. For 37 years, Mohammad Reza Shah had seemed as permanent as the Alborz Mountains behind Tehran. He had survived a communist coup attempt in the 1940s, an assassination attempt in 1965, and an earlier revolution in 1953 that had required CIA intervention to reverse. He had built the most powerful military in the Middle East outside of Israel. He had turned Iran into a regional superpower. And then, in the space of less than 12 months, it was over. He would spend the remaining 18 months of his life as the world's most unwanted guest, moving from Egypt to Morocco to the Bahamas to Mexico, desperately seeking a country willing to give him permanent sanctuary. When he was finally admitted to the United States for cancer treatment in October 1979, the decision would trigger a crisis that would consume the Carter presidency and define the relationship between America and Iran for the next half-century. But that crisis was still weeks away. On January 16, 1979, Tehran was celebrating. And in a suburb of Paris, a 76-year-old cleric was making his travel arrangements.
February 1, 1979. Mehrabad Airport, Tehran. The Air France Boeing 747 touched down at 9:33 in the morning. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini had been in exile for 15 years. He had left Iran as a dissident cleric. He was returning as the unquestioned leader of a revolution that had just toppled one of the most powerful governments in the Middle East. A French journalist on the plane asked him what he was feeling as he approached Iran after 15 years away. Khomeini's answer became one of the most quoted and most analyzed statements of the entire revolutionary period. "Nothing," he said. The crowd that met him at the airport and lined the route from Mehrabad to the Behishte Zahra cemetery, where he would make his first speech on Iranian soil, numbered somewhere between 3 and 5 million people. It remains one of the largest gatherings of human beings in recorded history. In his speech at the cemetery, Khomeini was direct and unambiguous in a way that left no room for misinterpretation. He would appoint a government. That government would be based on Islamic law. Anyone who opposed it was opposing God. The provisional government that had been negotiating a transition with the Shah's last prime minister, a coalition of liberals, nationalists, and secular reformers who had imagined themselves as the architects of post-Shah Iran, suddenly understood that they had been outmaneuvered. The revolution they thought they were leading had already been claimed by someone else. 10 days later, the last remnants of the imperial military collapsed. Iran was officially a republic. But the question of what kind of republic would consume the country for years to come.
The revolution devoured its own children. In the months and years that followed February 1979, the coalition that had toppled the Shah, liberals, Marxists, feminists, nationalists, Kurdish autonomy movements, secular intellectuals, discovered one by one that the Islamic Republic had no room for them. Women who had marched against the Shah found themselves mandated to wear the hijab within weeks of the revolution's victory. Protests erupted. They were suppressed. The liberal politicians who had imagined a democratic Islamic Republic found their parties banned and their leaders imprisoned or executed. The Marxist Mujahideen-e-Khalq, which had fought the Shah with genuine ferocity, found itself outlawed and hunted. The universities were closed for 3 years for what the new government called a cultural revolution, the purging of Western and secular influence from Iranian academic life. Then, in November 1979, a group of student revolutionaries scaled the walls of the American embassy in Tehran and took 52 American diplomats hostage. The hostage crisis lasted 444 days. It destroyed the Carter presidency, accelerated the collapse of U.S.-Iran relations into a state of permanent hostility, and gave Khomeini the political weapon he needed to consolidate power against the remaining moderates in his own coalition. Every crisis, every confrontation with America, every foreign threat, real or manufactured, strengthened the hand of those who argued that the revolution needed to be defended with total, uncompromising force. By the time Iran emerged from the hostage crisis and then immediately plunged into 8 years of devastating war with Saddam Hussein's Iraq, the Islamic Republic had taken the shape it would maintain for decades. Not the revolution that most of its participants had imagined, but a revolution nonetheless.
Stand in Tehran today and look at what the 1979 revolution left behind. A government that has survived 45 years of crushing economic sanctions, a devastating 8-year war, multiple assassination campaigns against its nuclear scientists, cyber attacks on its infrastructure, and the constant, unrelenting pressure of the most powerful military alliance in human history. It has not thrived under this pressure. Millions of educated Iranians have left. The economy has contracted. Ordinary people pay the price for the decisions of a government they did not fully choose. And yet, the Islamic Republic endures. Just as the Achaemenid Empire endured, just as the Parthians endured, just as Persian civilization endured the Greeks and the Arabs and the Mongols and Tamerlane. Whether that endurance is a testament to the strength of the revolutionary idea or to the extraordinary capacity of the Iranian state to suppress dissent, or to something deeper in the Iranian national character that has been resisting outside pressure for 2,500 years, historians will debate for generations. What is not debatable is this: the revolution of 1979 was not an accident. It was not the work of a single charismatic cleric or a single corrupt king. It was the product of decades of humiliation. A CIA coup, a secret police force, an oil company that took Iranian wealth and returned Iranian poverty, and a modernization project imposed from above without consent. The world did not see it coming because the world was not paying attention to what Iran was actually experiencing. It is a mistake the world has not entirely stopped making. And somewhere in that unlearned lesson lies the key to understanding not just Iran's past, but everything that is happening there today.